สวัสดีค่ะเลี้ยงลูก3ภาษากับมาม่าเจนนิเฟอร์ก็กลับมาแล้วนะคะสังเกตหรือเปล่าว่าวันนี้เฟอร์มีเก้าอี้เสริมขึ้นมาเพราะว่าวันนี้เฟอร์มี special guest ค่ะที่จะมาพูดถึงเรื่องเด็ก3ภาษานะคะแล้ว special guest แขกคนพิเศษของเฟอร์ก็จะเป็นใครไม่ได้นอกจากสามีเฟอร์เองค่ะ introducing ขอแนะนำ Mr. Stuart Hunter ค่ะ
Hi.
We will have to share the mic นี่คือสามีเฟิร์นนะคะก็ชื่อ Stuart Hunter นะคะเดี๋ยวจะให้เขาแนะนำตัวนิดนึงว่าเขามาจากไหนนะคะ Can you please introduce yourself quickly where you're from?
Yeah, so well you know I'm from the UK originally, living here in Singapore with the Hunter family.
And there are a few questions for quite many parents who married a foreigners and then live abroad who also have kids in overseas, not in Thailand. What are your thoughts about bilingual kids or multilingual kids?
I think it's great if you can have children who can speak more than one language. It's going to be a positive thing for them. It's going to enable them to navigate the world a lot more easily. It's going to help them navigate their multicultural background, so they'll be able to understand grandparents on both sides of the families, both sides of the culture that they've been experienced to. I'm assuming as well it's not just early in life, but it's later in life. So when they're in the teenage years and teenage angst comes around, and maybe they're trying to work out why one side of the family does things in a slightly different way to the other side, it's going to be so much easier for them to navigate that growing up experience if they can understand not only the language, but the nuances of the language, what phrases mean, all those unwritten rules that you get from understanding a country's language. I think that's one of the main benefits. And then obviously, as you become, working members of the world, you go out into the wider community, the wider world, you're just much more of a global citizen. And I think multicultural kids, by definition, are more like global citizens than other kids. So they want to feel like they've got an understanding and a place in the world.
Well, I know many Thai people who married foreigners and live in America, in Europe, or in any other countries who have kids and would like to speak to their kids in Thai, but their spouse is not quite sure about it or doesn't really like the idea that their kids will speak the language that they might not understand. What is your view about that? Are you okay with that, or what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure many people who are listening to this, either themselves or their partner or somebody they know, has been through this situation where you're pregnant, your family's pregnant with your first child, and that realisation strikes that what's going to happen when we start speaking in multiple languages to them. For me, I was worried. I was worried that not necessarily that it was a bad thing for me, but was it going to be a bad thing for Darla, our first girl to be born? Because I was just worried that if she learnt more than one language, it might hold her back, and hold her back in the ability to talk to me. And because I only understand English, I knew that she would be getting to know other languages and speaking another language that I couldn't communicate in. So I was worried about whether that would negatively affect the relationship with my daughter, because would she be able to communicate with me in as seamless and as close way as if she only learned one language, if she was only fluent in English. But that was, I don't think I was too concerned. And then the reality is when she arrived and we started speaking, I started speaking English and continued to speak English to her, and then you were speaking the other languages. The reality is you can see quite quickly that you still had a bond, you still were able to communicate with her. So the worry kind of passed.
So when I speak to her in Mandarin or in Thai, and you don't really understand what we were talking about, you're quite fine with that, right?
Yeah, I think you get used to it. But
Used to it.
yeah, I mean, it's like you get used to it. But I think even with your family, when you were growing up, you tell of instances where you and your brothers were not able to understand what your parents were speaking about, and they would play this little game where they would actually speak in their dialect, which they knew none of you understood, so they could say some things that they just maybe wanted to keep secret, but actually maybe it was just everyday language, everyday commands, everyday chit chat, that they just thought it's easier for us to say this together in this language, and it's not necessary for anyone else to really know about it. Maybe, I don't know, that was their little thing from when they were younger, when they first met each other. Maybe it's just something so special that they like to keep up as a couple. So you always hear instances of this kind of thing, and I think as you kind of get used to the fact that this is pretty normal. It might not be normal if you have come from a one language family and everyone understands what everyone else is saying, but the reality is lots of people in the world, lots of people in the world just have families where a number of the members of the family will be communicating in one language, and some of those members of the family will not be able to understand. And I think when you get your head around that, it's not such a bizarre thing to be happening. And then I think the reality is, as long as you can effectively have a relationship and communicate with every member of your family, then you just realise that you can still have those special relationships in English, and then I really enjoy seeing Darla having a special relationship, being able to communicate with you in Thai or Mandarin, and then we have another daughter who is learning. She can't really speak yet, but she's learning lots of different languages, and even she speaks to our helper in a language where no one else in the family really understands, but she's just speaking to our helper in the helper's mother tongue. So, and that's really cute, and again, it's like I don't feel threatened by that. I just think that's great that she is able to kind of connect with people around her in a new way.
And I sort of remember that when Dala was below 2, she only spoke Thai mostly, and you got so worried that you asked me, "Oh, when will Dala be able to speak English?" And now that she's over 3, looking back, would you tell yourself back then that you shouldn't be worried?
No. I think it's right to worry. That's just being a dad. So if anyone out there is worried, and then maybe you've got a newborn baby, or even she's 2 or he's 2 or 3, it's just natural. I don't think, looking back, I think it was right to be worried, and that's just part of the process. You've got kids, especially your firstborn kid. The other things that you're worrying that are more important, and whether or not she's going to be speaking your mother tongue. Essentially, if you have a mother tongue and you're in a couple and you both have your own mother tongue, if you do the things that you should be doing, that child will be speaking to either parent in both of those languages, and then it's obviously up to the parent as to whether they can understand both of those languages.
And now Aya is at the age, around the same age when Dala could not really speak English. Are you as worried as when you were with Dala?
No.
because you have an experience.
Yeah,
now, right?
Exactly. And I think you can say that about a lot of things with your second-born. So I'm sure lots of people listening to this will be like, they can just relate outside of a lingual situation, but just when they unfortunately fall over for the first time, or they cry through the night for the first time, or they're slightly ill for the first time, your second-born, you're just prepared because you've got a reference point, you've got an experience. So I think it's the same with bilingual, trilingual kids. You've been through that experience once before, and it's natural to be worried, but then when you can see that the natural worry is replaced by the joy of seeing your child being able to converse in multiple languages, and for the second one, he was like, well, when are you going to be speaking 2 or 3 languages? Come on. I want to see it. It's, you know, I'm not worried. I mean, now, I mean, literally, that's the first time I've even thought that question.
And my last question is, what are your thoughts about multilingual kids? Would you tell many other parents out there who might be thinking about having a bilingual kids or multilingual kids? Would it be a good thing or would it be a bad thing? Should they do it or should they be worried about it?
What are my thoughts? Well, first of all, everyone's different. Yeah, every family's different. And the family's got to be comfortable with it, because you don't want it to be a thing that
Creates the conflict.
Yeah, creates a conflict. It's not worth it. Life's hard enough without having to worry about that over language. But if everyone's broadly on board, then I think, and everyone's prepared to go on a journey and discover, then I think it's a fantastic thing. I think there are a number of reasons why. So as a kid growing up, you really want all the opportunities available to your child or to your children, and I think them being able to learn multiple languages, I think just opens them up into more situations, opens up to be able to speak with more people, opens them up to be more flexible, you know, just in everyday situation. Especially if you're living in a multi kind of cultural environment, which if you're living in a city anywhere in the world now, I'd say that's the truth. I think it's more fundamental that you've got 2 sets of families coming together through marriage and through kids, and if one side of the family speaks English and another side of the family speaks another language, and they can't really communicate very well between the 2 sides of the families, just for the child to make sense of where their place is in the world and what their role is in the world, and make sure that they feel connected to both sides of their family, both sides of their culture. I think being able to speak in more than English is really, really important, and we don't necessarily see all the benefits of it right now because they're so young, but think of just so many scenarios when they get to kind of like 8, 9, 10, and then those teenage kind of angst years. Who are they? Where is their place in the world? Why do I go to a temple? And why in Thailand, and why in Birmingham, in the UK? Why is everyone going to the pub for Christmas? These kind of like things that are part of not only language but culture, they'll be able to navigate so much more with so much more confidence and so much more understanding if they've got language behind it. Being able to ask people more freely, but also as well, just like what the unspoken rules and the unspoken culture that you get through language is really important. So I think that's really key, and so it will come into its own as a child is growing up, especially if the language, especially if you don't live, take the example of us and the Thai language, right? If we were all of us were in the UK, for example, or in Seattle or somewhere like this, it's literally thousands of miles away from Thailand and real Thai culture. So for them to be able to be really understanding of the language, I think just really makes them able to kind of really connect when they maybe go visit Thailand again, or go to see Thai communities outside of Thailand.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. And then finally, the only thing I'd say is why I think it's great to be bilingual, trilingual. It's just when you get outside of those teenage angst years and you kind of understand a little bit more about who you are, your background, just the world. I think you're much more of a global citizen. The world is and will continue to be interconnected, pandemic or not. And for you to be able to navigate through the world with more than one language, you can just make sense of it in a better way and make more connections with people around the world. I mean, people are always now connected to people all over the world through social media. And then if you're in a job where you're dealing with people around the world, or you're dealing with companies, teams that are made up from people around the world, I think you just have that kind of, it's hard coded into you through language and through your growing up, that you are able to understand the world around you maybe in a better way than if you've just got one language. That's one of my biggest regrets, that I can only speak English.
and emergency French and emergency Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so very, very little for emergencies only language. So yeah, I think it's just great if you can embrace it and get your head around the fact that it shouldn't be a threat to the family. It should be an opportunity. But then it's not so easy to actually. I'm saying this as an observer, but it's not so easy to actually ensure that you're doing things on a daily basis to enable your kids to actually become bilingual, which I think is obviously the challenge that you've able to meet.
As for me, I think to be able to pass on the second or third language to your children is their lifetime skills and the best gift that any parent can ever give to their children. So I would continue to do that with my girls, and I really hope that they will grow up being a global citizen who can connect to anyone in the world, either through Thai language or Chinese language. Thank you so much everyone for watching. We hope that our thoughts and our views would be useful for any parents out there in America, Europe, in Asia, in anywhere in the world who are thinking about raising bilingual, trilingual or multilingual kids. Good luck guys.
Good luck.
And bye for
Enjoy.
now.
Bye.